everybody, my name is Scott Bono and welcome to the channel. On today's episode, we are going to be recreating the Gin Blossoms' Hey Jealousy. Let's get into it. Hey Jealousy was the biggest single off the Gin Blossoms' second studio record, New Miserable Experience. It was recorded in 1992 and released in the summer of 1993. Something I hadn't realized before researching the song for this episode was that Hey Jealousy was actually originally recorded and released on the Gin Blossoms' first studio record in 1989, and then later re-recorded and re-released as a part of New Miserable Experience. Hey Jealousy is an infectiously catchy alterna pop tune, definitely more pop than grunge despite when it was released, and it's always been a favorite of mine, so I figured it would make a good subject for a recreating episode. And today I'm going to go through the top 3 things that I think make Hey Jealousy really work, and we are going to start with number 3, the drums. The drums are a sort of subtle but very important piece of what I think makes Hey Jealousy work. From the snare kick, intro at the beginning of the song all the way through the end, the drums drive the song when it needs to go, temper it when it needs to slow down, and do everything in between. They're aggressive without ever being over the top and just exactly what this song needs. While the basic drum beat is a very simple, syncopated 4/4 rock beat, there are a number of both subtle and not so subtle fills that happen throughout the song that really add some spice and some flavor to it. Let's take a listen to them now. Right from the beginning, the drums along with the bass do a little pickup that leads us into the intro, and you can already get a sense for where the drums are going to take the song. Let's take a listen. So the intro beat is the same beat as there is in the chorus of the song, and it gives you an idea of what the song is like when it's at its most open, with the drummer playing on the ride, wide open, and just this sort of big bombastic feel that drives the song and really captures the energy of what the song is trying to do. One of the spots where I think the drums really shine in the song is in the chorus, and especially the back half of the chorus where the drums get a chance to sort of cut loose a little bit. I'm going to play a little bit of that now along with the instrumentation so you can get a sense for it in the context of the mix. Take a listen. So obviously the drummer's having a lot of fun with what's going on there, and there's a lot of movement in the drums, but it never takes away from the song. It really fits in with what the rest of the song is trying to do. I just think that sounds great. In the spirit of every single time I do one of these songs, I learned something that I hadn't learned before. As I was listening to this song, trying to figure out how to recreate it, I noticed that on the album version of the song, I'm pretty sure the drums are mixed entirely in mono. I couldn't get a sense of any stereo spread in the song at all on the album version, and I'll get into why I think they may have done that a little bit later on in the song, but I had honestly never noticed that even though I've been listening to this song for almost 30 years. Overall, I think the drums do a really good job driving the arc of the song, and they play a key part in number 2 on today's video, which is the dynamics and the arrangement. The arrangement and dynamics are one of the key things that I think makes Hey Jealousy work. The tempo is pretty much fixed at 153 BPM, but the way that the song is arranged and the dynamics and the way that it's played really make it feel like it's got a bunch of tempo push and pull throughout the song. The song kicks off with the chorus chord progression, which is the biggest and most open section of the song. Here, the drummer is playing on the ride, which contributes to that big open feeling, and the guitars are playing heavy, distorted, big open chords. Then as we enter the first verse, the song feels like it begins to slow down and close up. There's a great little snare fill that takes us into the verse, and then all of the instrumentation closes up a little bit. The drums move to a tight hi-hat sound, and the guitar tones change completely. The guitar on the left-hand side is playing a palm-muted, sort of power chord, distorted feel, and the right side goes to a clean, arpeggiated sound. This continues for the first half of each verse, and in the back half of the verse, things start to open up a little bit. The drums go to an open hi-hat sound, the guitars open up a little bit more, and things start to breathe. Let's take a quick listen to how this sounds. I'm going to play from the tail end of the intro right into the first half of the first verse to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. Take a listen.
Tell me, do you think it'd be alright if I could just crash here tonight? You can see I'm in no shape for driving. Anyway, I got no place to go. And you know it might not be that bad. You were the best I ever had. If I hadn't blown the whole thing years ago, I might not be alone tomorrow.
So you can hear that feel, the big feel of the open chorus, part of the intro, the snare fill, closes up, goes into this nice tight and controlled piece that's the first half of the verse. The second half of the verse begins to open up and gives a little bit more movement there, and then we kick back into the chorus where things open up again. After the choruses, there's a little breakdown, which is dynamically the lowest and most fragile part of the song. We're back to tight hi-hats and a much more controlled guitar sound. Let's take a listen.
Hey, jealousy. Hey, jealousy. Hey, jealousy. Hey, jealousy. Well, you can trust me.
And that's basically the three major sections of the song. There's that very upbeat chorus, there is that breakdown, which is a little bit more controlled, and then you get those verses, which are really tight and controlled for the first half, and then opening up in the second. Altogether, it gives a really nice flow and sense of movement from the beginning to the end of the song. So that should give you an overall sense of the dynamics and the flow through the song, which I think really makes Hey Jealousy stand out. But before we go into number one on our list today, I want to give a quick honorable mention to something that I also think makes Hey Jealousy work really well, and those are the vocal melody and the lyrics. The overall vocal melody is just very catchy, and while I don't think it has anything really particularly unique or super special about it musically, I do think it's interesting that they chose to just have that one voice. It's just Robin Wilson's single lead vocal take throughout. There's plenty of room in there for things like harmonies and doubling, but they chose not to do that, and I think it was a good choice for the song. It works really well. The thing I really wanted to call out here, though, are the lyrics. The entire New Miserable Experience album is full of little lyrical gems, and Hey Jealousy is no exception in that regard. As an aside, one of my all-time favorite vocal lines comes from another track on this album. It's called Lost Horizons. The line is, "She had nothing left to say, so she said she loved me, and I stood there grateful for the lie." That's a great line. It's just a great line right there. Anyway, back to Hey Jealousy. Hey Jealousy tells the very relatable story of someone who has run into an ex, maybe they're the one that got away, and is just absolutely pining for the good old days. From lines like, "If I hadn't blown the whole thing years ago, I might not be alone," which is at the tail end of every single one of the verses, to the last line of the chorus, which is, "The past is gone, but something might be found to take its place." There are little gems sprinkled throughout the entire song. Maybe my favorite one is, "If you don't expect too much from me, you might not be let down." I think probably all of us can relate to that in some way or another. Okay, and that brings us to the number one thing that I think makes Hey Jealousy work really well, and that is the guitars. Even though I've heard this song a million times and even played it live a bunch of times, it wasn't until I sat down to recreate the song that I really started paying attention to what was going on with the guitars, and I was surprised at how intricate and nuanced they are. There's a few things that stand out with the guitars when you listen closely. For starters, there are two main guitars in the song, and they're each panned one hard right and one hard left. But as opposed to many other pop and rock songs that are guitar heavy, these two guitars are not doubles of one another. In fact, they never play the same part at the same time. Each of them is doing something interesting and unique all the time, playing off of each other, creating a really interesting and unique sense of movement and sonic character to the song, which is pretty different from a lot of what else was happening at the time. Secondly, the tone and feel of the guitars changes dramatically over the course of the song, from heavy, overdriven, wide open chords to palm-muted staccato power chords to clean arpeggios and clean ascending and descending chords. There's something interesting and unique happening throughout the song, and I just think that makes it sound great. As I mentioned earlier, when I was listening to the drums, I noticed that they were seemingly mixed in mono, and I'm wondering if one of the reasons that they did that was to give the guitars the opportunity to create all of that movement in the stereo field with those distinct and unique guitar parts that are playing off of each other throughout the song. I don't know if that was done on purpose or not, but either way, it works, so well done. Let's take a quick look at all the various guitar parts in the song. So, everything here in blue is a guitar. For each side, left and right, there are 4 different guitar parts that are happening throughout the song, and that's excluding the guitar solo. On the left-hand side, you have mostly heavy and overdriven guitar tones, although there's some different playing patterns there, from wide open chord strumming to staccato palm muting. On the right-hand side, you have a mix of heavy guitars and clean arpeggiated and ascending chord progressions. There's one section that's panned to the left that I call heavy octaves, which generally happens during the chorus and is the primary guitar tone that you hear there. To give you an idea of what's going on, I'm going to solo just the guitars for now and play through a little bit of each one of the sections, starting with the verse. So here are the guitars leading into verse 1. So that's the first and sort of down half of the verse, and then we pick up into the more open part of the verse. Take a listen. So then we head into the chorus, and that's where that heavy octaves that I mentioned, guitar comes in on the left-hand side, accompanied by a distorted but sort of buried in the mix, big open strumming on the right-hand side. Take a quick listen. And then as we head into that post-chorus down part, you hear the guitars close up a little bit and definitely a more of a down feel from the chorus. Take a quick listen. So the guitars are doing a really good job of sort of moving with the song and creating that sense of movement, even though the tempo is sitting there fixed right at 153 throughout the song. And of course, this plays a big part in item number 2 that we talked about today, which is the arrangement and the dynamics. All in all of these pieces together, the drums, the bass, the guitars, and what's happening lyrically in the song works to create a really strong sense of movement, even though, again, that song is sitting there pegged at 153. Okay, now that we have broken the song down, it is time to put it back together. Let's walk through what it took to recreate my cover of Hey Jealousy. First, a quick confession. This is not quite as faithful a recreation as the other songs that I've done so far on the channel. This was a really tough nut to crack. There's a lot going on, and I wasn't able to find isolated masters for this song, so I kind of had to pick out a number of things by ear. And then with things like the drums, while on the album track, those are mixed in mono, I just couldn't bring myself to mix my own version of the track in mono, so I put the drums in stereo. So all in all, I'd give myself maybe a B+ for faithfulness in this recreation. And speaking of the drums, for the drums on this track, again, I'm not quite skilled enough a drummer to play this one on my own, so I did program everything using the piano roll editor in Logic Pro, and then I sequenced everything through Superior Drummer 3. One tip I've picked up as I've been going through this process about programming the drums, if you can't get a master track with just the drum sounds on there, throw an EQ on the track that you're listening to and have it bandpass everything above about 800 hertz, and you'll get a pretty good sense of what's happening with the kick and the snare, and that'll give you a really good starting point for whatever song it is that you're trying to map the drums out for. The bass part for the song was pretty simple. It's mostly just root notes and some passing tones. The one exception there is the chorus has some pretty cool movement that was fun to learn and play. Let's take a quick listen. Here is the bass and the drums soloed, heading from verse 1 into the chorus. So you can hear pretty simple, but it's doing exactly what the song needs. This was a fun one to learn and play. For the bass, I took a pretty standard approach here. I tracked through a Rupert Neve DI as well as a Sansamp preamp pedal, and then when I loaded everything into Logic, I duplicated that DI signal and ran a version of that through the Line 6 Helix plugin using an Ampeg SVT model. In the mix, I just took the 3 of those, blended them for a little bit of stereo space and the texture that I was looking for, summed those up, and put them into a bus. The guitars were by far the most tricky and time-consuming part of recreating this song. Not because the parts themselves are particularly tricky, at least not the way that I heard them, but because there's so much movement and so many distinct sounds and distinct parts that are being played. It took some time to both record all of those, find the right tones to represent them, and then do a ton of automation to make sure that they blend together seamlessly in the final product. This mess of a view of the Logic project is showing you the automation of the various guitar parts. You can see where I'm basically hard cutting from one track to another to get that sound and make sure that it blends and it sounds pretty seamless. It took a lot of iteration and playing with this to get it right, but I'm pretty happy with how it turned out in the end. For the guitar tones on this one, I had a really hard time. I had actually recorded this song in the early part of 2020 and done a mix for that and shared it out. But when I sat down to go do this video, I realized I wasn't happy at all with the way that the guitars sounded. Luckily, I had kept around all of the dry tracks for the guitars when I did the original recording, so I didn't have to re-record anything when it came time to make the version for this video. I did reamp every single one of the guitar tracks for this version of the song, and while I was struggling trying to find the right tone using my own analog gear, I ultimately decided to use this as an opportunity to give Amplitude 5 a try, and that worked out really well. Across the song, I'm using 4 or 5 guitar patches that I built from scratch in Amplitude 5. For the guitars themselves, on the left-hand side, I played my trusty old 1995 Mexican Fender Strat. The only real change there is that I have a Seymour Duncan stacked humbucker in the bridge position, which is what I used to record the song. On the right-hand side, I used my DG 335 with the pickup in the middle position. And for the solo, I used my custom shop Les Paul 1955 with the pickup in the bridge position. And last but definitely not least, for the vocals. You may have noticed that that was not my voice adorning the vocals on this song. The vocals were provided by my friend David Foley Jr. Dave is one of my oldest friends and what I would call a real musician or performer. He's been a full-time performing artist in national touring companies of Shrek the Musical and Phantom of the Opera, among others. But obviously, much more importantly, he was the first singer of my very first band all the way back in the mid-90s. It was awesome to get a chance to work with Dave again, even if we had to do so remotely, and you'll definitely hear more of him on upcoming songs and videos on this channel. So thank you, Dave, for all of the work on the song. I really appreciate it. And that's it. That's my breakdown and recreation of the Gin Blossoms' Hey Jealousy. This was a super fun one to work on despite all my challenges getting the guitar tones right. I enjoyed it a lot. I hope you all did as well. It was also a great excuse to get an opportunity to reconnect and collaborate with my old friend Dave, so thanks again, Dave. We're just getting started here on the channel, and if you find this stuff interesting or enjoyable at all and wouldn't mind hitting that like button and maybe that subscribe button, that would mean a great deal. I have a couple of other videos in this series posted already, one for Interstate Love Song by Stone Temple Pilots and one for Nutshell by Alice in Chains. I'll put a link at the end if you want to check those out. And that's it for today. Thank you all so much for watching. Have a great day, and we'll see you in the next one.
Hey, jealousy, she took my heart.